Hopefully you haven't taken 3 years to build your character. If you've been waiting on me to build your first character, then I humbly apologize. But we are now going to continue with how to build your player character in Dungeons & Dragons with, I think, our 4th video now on hit points and armor class. Stay tuned. So this might be a good time to also point out that not all player character sheets are created equal. This is a player character sheet that comes with the starter set, the Fantastic Starter Set. See, it's blank name there. It's already pre-printed. And in this one, you've got armor class, and instead of hit points, where in one of the earlier videos I had, the hit points was here where the speed badge is. There's this big section for hit points underneath. And then on D&D Beyond, if we look at one of the sheets that you can print here, I will scroll up and show you guys one of my characters. Jesper Cornflower, the Bard. Oh goodness, let me close that out. You see that armor class and hit points are sort of here. The badge for armor class, oh there, and then hit points in this little section over here. And so just wanted to point out that these are not all created equal. Jesper, yes, is extremely weak with a strength of 6, but just so you guys don't despair, he is super charismatic. Look at that persuasion and performance bonus, +10. It's ridiculous. He's level 8. He's got a +4 to charisma. So yeah, he's a pretty peppy bard. So let's break down hit points first. It seems like it should be pretty straightforward, but maybe not necessarily. And what we'll do is turn to the player handbook here on page 12. And we have a little paragraph here about hit points and hit dice. Your character's hit points define how tough your character is in combat and other easy for me to say, dangerous situations. Your hit points are determined by your hit dice, short for hit point dice. And at level 1, your first level, your hit die is determined by your class. You start with hit points equal to the highest roll of that die. So if you have a fighter, for example, the hit dice for a fighter is a D10. This character here is a fighter, and I'm grilling, so I'm a little gross. I apologize. But good grief. So the hit dice for a fighter is a D10. And so we see level 1. How many hit points does this fighter have? Oh, he has 12. But you just said it's a D10. So according to this, you start with points equal to the highest roll of that die. So if it's a D10, but look at this in parentheses. You also add your Constitution modifier, which you'll determine in step 3 as you're building out your ability scores, which is in an earlier video. But you add that modifier as well. And so for this fighter, his Constitution modifier is a +2. So 10 + 2 gives us 12 as a hit point maximum for a level 1 character. I'm going to continue talking about hit points from the backyard as, like I said, I am grill mastering this evening. Level 2 then, what happens when you level up with hit points? This is where you got to be a little bit honest. You take your hit dice. So if you're a fighter, you take your D10, close your eyes, you say a small prayer to Kelemvor or to whomever it is that you need to say a prayer to, and you roll that dice. And you accept whatever fate delivers on your dice roll. You still get to add your Constitution modifier. So worst case scenario is that fighter with 12 hit points that we just showed you. If you roll your D10 and you roll a 1, you add 3, 1 + 2, because of his con modifier. If you roll another 10, boom, you add 12 more. So you can see that he's really stretching his hit points. And with each subsequent level you add, you do the same thing. Roll another D10, roll another D10. In case of a fighter, in case of a wizard or a sorcerer, it's a D6. If in case of a bard, it's a D8. And it's all listed in the player handbook, which hit dice is associated with each class. And you just keep adding them up as you go. And it wouldn't be Drinks and Dragons if I didn't have a drink. So cheers. Happy September the 12th, 2020. Hope you guys are hanging in there in this pandemic. Next, we're going to talk about armor class. So armor class is the number that whatever a creature is trying to attack you rolls with their d20 gets compared to see if it actually hits you. So in the description here in the player's handbook, it says your armor class represents how well your character avoids being wounded in battle. So a character, say a monster, a doppelganger rolls his d20 and it rolls a 14 plus whatever modifiers. Let's say it's 16, but your armor class is 17. Well, he doesn't hit. You blocked his attack because of your armor class. Also, it goes on to say things that contribute to your armor class include the armor you wear, the shield you carry, and your dexterity modifier. And it goes on to say that, listen, you've got to be proficient with the armor and shields that you have to use them effectively. Otherwise, then it could be a detriment. So, armor class comes from Chapter 5, Equipment. And there's a table here on page 145 of the Player's Handbook, which talks about what armor, whether you're light, medium, heavy armor, or whether you have a shield and what type of armor within each of those categories, what those do to your armor class. And here's how you calculate it. It gives you the base number, and then you add your dex modifier. And if there's a limit to that, there's your max. And then also, by the way, what happens if you are trying to be stealthy if you have certain armor on? Now, disadvantage on stealth. So one of the questions you might be asking is, can armor class change? Yeah, of course it can. Say as the campaign continues, perhaps you defeat some foe, some enemy, and that enemy has a chain shirt, for example, as a part of its armor. You can take that chain shirt and maybe you change your armor class as a result of that. Maybe you're starting out as a commoner or almost a commoner. Maybe you don't have much starting equipment and you find someone with studded leather. Well, guess what? Your armor class then goes from a 10 plus your dex to a 12 plus your dex modifier. So yeah, armor class can change as a part of the campaign as it unfolds. And it's, like I said, critically important that's the number that gets compared to the attack roll against you. Does it hit you or doesn't it? So if your armor class is 18 and you're going up against some massive creature that has a +6 on his attack roll, it doesn't matter if you're wearing a plate mail with a shield, you may get hits, and that's where it relates to your hit points. That damage will then reduce the number of hit points that you've got. So I hope you're seeing kind of how all of these things connect as you kind of move across the player sheet. And so for part 5 of how to create your Dungeons & Dragons character, we've talked about the ability scores and modifiers. We've talked about armor class. We've talked about hit points. We've talked about initiative. No, we haven't actually talked about initiative. I think we talked about proficiency bonus. So maybe next time we'll talk about initiative, inspiration, and then some of these other big text areas over here. Ideals, bonds, flaws, personality traits, things like that sort of round out your character, that begin to sort of describe who that character is. So stay tuned. There's more on the player sheet. We're going to get through all of it. And we'll talk to you later.